Welcome to Don and Steve Plus. Welcome to Julia Ubbenga. And I am so excited about this conversation because I think a lot of us,
I kind of
John's already
am.
nervously laughing about this because I think a lot of us can look at the idea and the concept of
Mhm.
decluttering our lives and say, yes, that is something I need to do. Now, how do we go about doing that? That's a different thing. But Julia, you say that God wants us to experience an abundant life and it all begins with clearing clutter. What do you mean by that?
Mhm. Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. I am a minimalist. I haven't always been a minimalist. Pretty far from it, actually. I grew up close to my grandma, and my grandma, she loved to shop. And so when I would go shopping with her, we would just spend hours at the mall. And I soon learned that shopping was fun, that it was a way to feel good, it was a way not to feel bad. And I carried this mindset into my 20s. And I started making money, I started spending money. Pretty soon, I had all this stuff and $40,000 worth of consumer debt. But when I thought about the debt, I felt bad. And when I felt bad, I'd go buy something new because that's what I thought would make me feel good and make me feel happy. And so the cycle, it really continued up about until the time our second daughter was born. And I was working outside the home as a speech therapist at the time, but I always wanted to stay home. That was my dream, to stay home with our kids. And my husband got a promotion at the time. I could stay home. I was so excited, but I had this really idyllic vision of what stay at home mom life would be like. I thought I'd be,
Most people do, yep.
yeah, I thought I'd be baking cookies with our daughters, giggling over tea parties, snuggled on the couch, reading Little House on the Prairie. So in my mind, it was just going to be great. But a couple of weeks into the stay at home mom gig, I wouldn't even called myself a stay at home mom. I would have said I was a full time stuff manager because that's what I did. I was constantly looking for things and cleaning things and just picking things up, tripping over things I hadn't picked up. It was all consuming and I was stressed. I was exhausted. I couldn't really be present to the people around me. Like I was there, but I wasn't really there. I was just overwhelmed. And a couple months into living this way, I was actually diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I have this memory of this morning where I was up in the nursery in the recliner chair, feeding our baby and talking with God, really pleading with God. I was like, God, what is going on here? This isn't what I signed up for. Something needs to change. And I was reading the Bible and a couple of verses out of Luke chapter 12. They just jumped off the page at me. And they said, your life does not consist of possessions. Be rich in what matters. And so I paused right there and I asked myself, was I rich in what mattered? Was I rich in relationships and time to know God, my faith, for a hobby that I loved? And no, the answer was no, I wasn't. And so that planted the seed that something in my life around the area of possessions, it needed to change, but I didn't know what. I didn't know where to go from there. And that same week, I had a therapy appointment. And at the end of the session, just as I was leaving, the therapist said, Julia, have you ever heard of minimalism? And I'm like, oh, you mean houses with white walls, next to nothing in them? And she's like, no, there's a lot more to it than that. Look into it. I think you might be interested. And so I was, and I started looking into it, read all the books, the blogs, listened to the podcasts, and this idea that I didn't need all this stuff to be happy. And in fact, I'd be a whole lot happier with less of it because then I'd have more time and energy to focus on who and what mattered. It was a mindset shift that was life changing. And it finally gave me a way to just lessen all that stress and anxiety that I was feeling at home. So I went all in on minimalism. I started a blog at the time. I called it Rich in What Matters, based on the Bible verse that spoke to me. And we got rid of 75% of our stuff over the course of the first year. We downsized to an apartment for a couple years. We got rid of our debt. Then we built an intentionally smaller new home. And so we've been living this way for 6 years now as a minimalist family, and we have 5 kids, ages 11, 7, 4, 2, and 2 months. So that's the story of how I found an abundant life with less stuff.
Wow, and I'm sure your blog and was the precursor to the book, Declutter Your Heart and Your Home, how a minimalist life yields maximum joy. And I'm so thankful that you're able to share this with us in a new platform with the book, because some of us who really ascribe to what you're saying have a difficult time. And I'm laughing thinking about you going to the mall with your grandmother, because now we just pick up our phone and hit purchase from Amazon. So how much easier it is for us to still accumulate stuff. But when I think about this minimalism thing, Julia, I I'm reminded of something that happens to me every time I throw something out. And that is I will need it within the next 2 weeks. Now, I'm not a hoarder, but I have a lot of stuff. And when I go to clean out boxes and put things, give things away, all of that process, I will need it. And then I have to go buy it. It just frustrates me. So I'm like, well, just tuck that away. I'll probably need that tape dispenser, at Christmas time. How do you fight that in your brain?
Well, everybody has a different vocation and a calling too. You might need more stuff than I do or than somebody else does. And actually, when I was getting into minimalism, I was looking at scripture and I was realizing that not everyone, there's no blanket statement in scripture that says you have to let go of all your stuff to follow Jesus. We know some people were asked to. The rich young man was asked to. We don't really know if he did or not. Simon Peter, you know, the apostles, some of them did, but um, then there's Lydia in the book of Acts, where when she became a believer, she didn't let go of all her stuff, but she used it and she made her home the first European church. So the question really isn't for us, how do we let go of everything to follow Jesus, but how do we follow Jesus with everything? And so that means we give everything to him, even the stuff we're going to keep. And I think that mindset shift can help us let go of our stuff that is all his anyway. It always has been, the good and the beautiful, the things in the world, they can be good and beautiful, and they are. And they remind us of a higher good, a higher beauty. So then, but to your point specifically, what do you do if you're throwing stuff out that you need? I think that in my mind, I like to use a rule called the 20/20 rule. If I can buy something back in 20 minutes for less than $20, then I'm gonna let it go. And in my experience, I don't need the stuff that I let go of. I don't miss it. I think we need so much less than we think we do to be happy. Again, everybody's situation is different, but for my experience, like I can't tell you anything I've missed that I've donated or let go of, and I can't tell you anything that I've bought back yet. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. You
Mhm.
haven't even bought it back. Okay.
Yeah.
No. Mm-mm.
Huh.
And one of the things, though, that I'm wondering if you could just explain this a little bit more for me is this whole concept of minimalism and being a minimalist, because in my mind that means purging. Is that all it is, or is there a lot more to it than that? Because for some of us, if I hear minimalist, I just think get rid of stuff and my life's going to be easy. But I hear you saying like it's deeper than that.
It's much deeper than that. I love that question. Yeah, I thought that minimalism at first was somebody who, owned only 100 possessions, only wore black, had the white walls, maybe didn't have kids because they didn't want their house to be messed up. But even when I first got into minimalism, I remember I was on an airplane, I had nothing else to do. And so I started listing out everything I owned because I'm like, okay, if I have 100 items, then I'm a minimalist. So I got to number 330 and I was so discouraged. Like, how am I going to do this? I have all this stuff. And it's not that. And then I realized that if I was counting possessions, I had minimalism all wrong. That wasn't what it was about. It was just a tool. It was a tool to live your life with intention. And so it was really about getting rid of the things in my life that didn't matter to make space in my life for the things that did. And that applied to more than just my possessions. It applied to my calendar commitments. It applied to my thought patterns. And so really it's just about living your life with intention and really discerning what you let into your life.
Uh, that That is such a beautiful definition and challenges each of us in our own walk with the Lord. Because you also mentioned debt and money and the things that we are rich in. How did you come to an understanding of how to use money to glorify God and not just feed what our brains want? And that is to chase after the flesh. Like we want what we want, right? We want the thing that's going to bring the dopamine hit. If that's shopping, it's a new possession, and yet you have found that it's a flipped script when it comes to following the Lord with money. So, what was that lesson and how did he teach you that?
Yes, I definitely thought that money was, well I guess what I would say is when I spent so much time pursuing possessions, definitely I wanted to have more money so that I could buy more things. It's just a cycle that we get caught into, and then we're putting all of our focus on stuff and on money, and then we realize that that isn't ultimately what matters, and that, like, our stuff has always been his, from him, so is our money. It's his, it's from him. And so I think we need to detach from our money as well, just like we do our possessions. And I think it takes a heart level shift when you realize that the things that don't matter, or the things that matter, aren't really things.
You said just a minute ago that it was more than just being a minimalist. It was more than just, getting rid of things down to 100 items, but it involved a change of calendar. It involved a change of the way in which you thought. Talk for a minute, if you would, about, what God showed you and what you've learned about that thought life. And
Mm.
like, can you be a minimalist thought person? Or what do you mean by that?
I love that.
I don't have a thought in
I
my
don't have a
head.
thought. Like, I'm going to get down to it. Where I think
Oh,
about three
sorry.
things.
Oh man, no, as a mom of 5, I have lots of thoughts. However, it's about discerning the thoughts that you listen to. And is it truth or is it not? Where is it coming from? We have so many thoughts a day, and 80%, a study said, are negative. So we have to be aware of our thoughts. We have to be listening to our thoughts and then discerning if we're going to let them in our lives or not. One tool that I love for this that I talk about in the book is called ant catching. ANT is an acronym for automatic negative thoughts. And Dr. Daniel Amen is the one who came up with this. And so he lists out 9 different types of automatic negative thoughts that you can have. Some are like guilt beating at ants. Anytime you say the word should in your mind, like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. That's a red flag to think, okay, like, are you? Should you? And then labeling also, like for moms, you might be thinking, oh, I'm a bad mom. Maybe you did something you wish you didn't. Oh, you yelled at your kids. Oh, I'm a bad mom. Well, then what you want to do is you want to counter all those thoughts with truth. And so you want to write them out and then write out the truth statement. You're smashing the ant with your truth statement. So I'm a bad mom, write that out. And then you can write out, I'm showing up and I'm doing my best. And that's actually every thought we have is a chemical reaction in our brain. And so not only are we changing our thoughts and our mood and the way we are showing up around the people who how we're showing up around the people we love, but we're also changing our brain and we're building a stronger brain for it.
Mhm. Stronger brain, and that's the inner decluttering.
Yeah.
And you talk about the outer decluttering, and I think this goes back to where I start getting hives almost because I think it's not that I'm married to my stuff. I think that's interesting because we all have a different relationship with our stuff. I totally ascribe to what you're saying, Julia, in that it's his. It's his home. It's his stuff that's in the house. He can use it for his glory and his purposes. And then though, when I start thinking about decluttering, there's something I was telling the guys, like, I just don't feel like I have that gene in my personhood to say, I know how to do this well. And all my friends do it extremely well. And they'll come over and help me do, certain projects, which I always appreciate. But when you start talking about that shift in the outer decluttering challenges, and you went from 300 plus to 100, and you did the 2020 rule, but how did you decide to let that go? Because you were surrounded by stuff. And what was that outer decluttering? What did it look like? Just give it all away?
No, it was a slow process for me. I had a baby at the time. It was 15 minutes a day. I would start working on it and just was consistently dedicated to letting things go. Yeah, I donated most of it. I sold the bigger items, maybe furniture. But what really helped me let go also is just knowing some of the research behind how we feel in a cluttered environment. They're starting to study this because we live in a time that has more possessions than any society in the history of the world. And so now we're starting to look at what is that doing to us? And they're finding that it's actually causing us some stress. There's a study out of UCLA that looked at moms' stress levels in the home. There are 32 homes that they looked at. It was a 4-year study, and they had the moms go through the home and actually describe how they felt in the home. And then they also measured the mom's cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone in the home. And they found that the moms who had higher, the moms who described their homes as messy or chaotic had higher cortisol levels than those who described it as restorative or calm. And so people in the moms in the messy homes, they had cortisol levels that started high and stayed high all day. And that led to poor sleep, that led to anxiety. So they concluded that the amount of stress a mom is feeling in the home can be tied to the amount of possessions they and their family have accumulated. And I felt that. I saw the research and I felt that. And that just made me realize that I had to try it. I had to try it. And for me it was life changing.
15 minutes a day. I love that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
What a good, because then you
that's a good
don't
tip,
feel,
right?
yeah, you
It's
don't
not as
feel so
overwhelming.
overwhelmed.
Yeah. So as you began to put this into practice in that 15 minutes a day, what did that actually look like? Because some of us, we can hear that and say, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I get that. But man, I have so much stuff. I wouldn't even know where to start. I wouldn't even, have an idea of the kind of stuff that I should be letting go first. It just feels so overwhelming. So as you began to put that 15 minutes into practice, what did that actually look like for you?
For me personally, what I did is I started in the area of my home that was causing me the most stress. I didn't have a lot of time. And so I had read that the best place to start was in a small contained place that had non-sentimental items like your kitchen drawer. And so I tried that and I tried decluttering my kitchen drawer and I had all the feel goods of finishing a decluttering project. But what I realized is that then I would turn around and I was just overwhelmed by kid stuff. It was everywhere. So it really made no functional change in my home if I was decluttering my kitchen drawers at the beginning. I was still overwhelmed. So really, I just took a piece of paper, I wrote down all the areas that I wanted to declutter, and then I rated them. 10 was the most stressful, and then down to 1, which was the least. And I started at number 10, which was kids' clothes for me. And after I decluttered kids' clothes, the home felt noticeably lighter. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, started helping with laundry independently. I hadn't asked her, but the amount now matched her ability level, and she felt like she could contribute, which I loved. And I was like, wow, I am on to something. And that motivated me then to go to the next category, which was kids' toys. So for me, that's how I did it. And that's what I'd recommend, especially for moms.
Well, and in your book, you talk about decluttering the main floor. And yes, that is in the home, but it's also in the heart. So, what was going on simultaneously in your heart as you started doing these 15-minute projects?
Mm. I realized not only did I realize that my stuff wasn't what mattered most and how much time and energy I'd invested in it, I made more time for a relationship with God. And I was intentional about that. I realized that He was the one who would make me happy. Nothing else could fill that hole in my heart. It was Him. And so I started in the morning. I had cleared our kitchen table when I was decluttering the kitchen. I cleared our kitchen table and I sat at that table and I didn't know how to pray really. And I told God that, I'm like, I don't really know how to pray, but we're here together. And I felt peace. And that made me want to come back. And that made me want to come back, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And the more that I consistently felt, or the more I consistently spent time with him in the morning, then I would start to feel his presence with me during the day and realize he was with me. And so that is what, for me, that is where the peace comes from. That is where the joy comes from. It's making that choice to fill your newfound space after you've decluttered your home with God.
I love that.
So good.
How long did it take you to get to the point where you really noticed there was a significant change, both in the way your home felt and in the way your heart felt?
A great question. The home immediately after I decluttered kids' clothes, after that first category is gone, I'm like, wow, this is different. There is a change here. In my heart, I would say it took a few months. There were some days though that I felt it real strongly and others, not as strongly, but I started feeling these overwhelming urges to do something. Like I was feeling like called to do something like text this friend of yours who's about to have a baby and encourage her. And so I'd send that text and she sent back a text, please pray. I'm headed to the hospital. I'm in labor. I'm like, oh my gosh, like Holy Spirit, that was you. So I started feeling these things. Like I would feel like, oh, you've got to go check on your daughter. And I'd go look for her in the home and she'd be on the back porch crying. Like she needed me at that moment. And Holy Spirit, thank you. So I started feeling those things in my life, just these overwhelming urges to do things. And that was new for me. And it was really
Mhm.
cool to see what happened when I followed through on them.
I love those God stories. We always love the God stories and how He's moving and challenging and changing us. And you have been through such a journey, and it's encouraging as well as challenging, and in such a good way. And if we think, well, I just can't do that now, you had little kids, and you still have little kids. Mine are grown, and I'm thinking, oh, where am I going to find it out?
Yeah, what's your excuse?
One. Thanks, Julia. I have no excuse now. You you also talk about decluttering the mind. So we talk about the heart and the mind, and sometimes we meld those together, and we don't think they're separate, and we know that they are. So as the Lord was working on your heart, then what was going on simultaneously in your mind? What was the difference there?
I think I was being more able to focus on the good and the true and the beautiful and feeling more called to really, like we talked about, my thoughts were a big shift in the mind. Also, reactivity was another thing that I dealt with all the kid stuff and all the my nervous system was in fight or flight a lot. I was just reactive. And so I started just to realize that, everything was okay. And my nervous system started to be able to relax more. And I do think that affected my thoughts and the way I showed up around the people who I love. Yeah. So that was a shift in my mind for sure.
One of the areas that I think a lot of us may struggle with to have some sort of control over, and when I was looking through the book and different things, you have something where you talk about dealing with or detoxing from the digital clutter,
Mm.
and that is something that when I hear minimalist didn't even cross my mind until you brought that up. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on dealing with that digital clutter.
I love that question because what I've found is you can get rid of lots of stuff. And if you're filling up that time with an unintentional scrolling, with online shopping, you're not going to feel free. You're not going to feel those life changing effects of decluttering if you're tethered to your phone. And so it's another area that we can bring intentionality into our lives. How much time am I spending on my phone? Why? Start asking those questions, start finding some tools, keep it on grayscale. I even put like a rubber band around it so that when I started to scroll, my hand would hit that rubber band. I'm like, oh, wait, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing right now, or not what I want to be doing right now. Because those phones are made to steal our attention. And that's not what we're called to be doing all the time, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And the tools that the Lord has taught you, the rubber band and the way that you can make the choices to let things go. And I know you also address this sentimental items and letting go of fear. And I think that goes back. I keep going back to how do you let go of some of the items in your home? And that is kind of on the pulse of what I'm talking about, like that sentimentality. My husband says, honey, we have buckets of photos back when you printed all the photos because my
Yeah.
kids are a little older. And he said, can we just go through those one at a time? But it's so overwhelming and it's so sentimental, even though I may not do anything with those. And then I've got that fear of, I mean, should I let that go? It's got the kid's face on it. How did the Lord guide you through that?
Photos are really hard to let go of. That might have been what
Yeah.
was the most difficult for me because I love pictures and I've got the kids and all their pictures. And But what I realized was that when I had so much stuff, I couldn't really enjoy it as well as I could if I had just my favorites. And so what I did with pictures, I actually used a tool called the spontaneous combustion question. You hold a picture and you ask yourself, or hold any sentimental item actually, and you ask yourself, how would I feel if this item spontaneously combusted? And you tap into how you feel. So would you feel good? Then you want to let that item go. If you'd feel kind of in the middle about it, then take a picture of that item, then let it go. And if you would feel devastated, that's definitely something you want to keep. So you do want to keep some of that stuff. You don't want to let it all go, but that really can tap into your true feeling about it. And so just keep the ones that you love, keep your favorites. If things are boxed away in storage in your basement, in your garage, if you have 15 boxes in your garage, you're not enjoying those things. You're not getting any use out of them. Yeah, I have one basket now of sentimental things. I have it up in my closet and I can pull it down and I can show my kids, like my grandma's slanted handwriting on the letters she's written me. I can show them this little camel I built or bought in Egypt when I was traveling. And so those stories come to life when you just own your favorite things and you can interact with them and you can see them often. So I think just understanding that you'll feel much lighter. You can, I think too, we hold on to a lot of stuff in our past, and that can almost tie us to our past too. And the place where we meet God is in the present moment. It's here, it's now. And so by letting go of some of that stuff from our past, we can really live more presently now. Yeah.
Such a good point.
Yeah, you shared some really good tips with us over the last little bit, but I'm thinking for the person who says, "All right, I'm convinced I need to begin to make changes, but it all feels so overwhelming." um, where is the place that you think is the best place to start?
I would actually recommend if you want a quick decluttering win, go declutter the front of your fridge. Because in that study that I mentioned from UCLA, they found that the average fridge had 52 items on it. And if you have a lot of stuff on your fridge, so the higher the fridge density, the more stuff you have in your home. So there's a correlation between the two. So go declutter the front of your fridge, clear it off, or just keep your very favorite thing, and then see that often. And let that be a reminder that you're going to make change in your home, that this is not going to be a cluttered space anymore, that you can do this.
That's a great tip. And the more you practice this, the more you spend time with the Lord, I know that he changes. It just makes such sense. And watching you as you tell your timeline and watching your life change to be more oriented toward the Lord and less oriented toward the stuff of this world. Your point about letting go of the things that are in the past because we're living in the present is very, very powerful. And that's a fear and trust thing. Like letting go of the fear and choosing to trust the Lord for this day. And that's a challenge and encouraging.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I'm still thinking though about the last time I did a huge declutter and decided to get rid of my wedding dress.
Okay.
And I have grieved that lately. At the time, I was like, no, my girls are not going to wear this dress. It was one of those fabrics that they said you can't dry clean it and you can't clean it. So I never was able to get it restored, and put away in its little box. But for whatever reason, in the last several months, I'm like, Lord, should I? And I think it's just sentimentality. Like I still got the man, so I'll just keep him. I just keep him.
Be happy with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got him, going on 33 years. So I'm thankful for that. But there is something about that sentimentality. And I'm like, see, this is why I don't like to get rid of things. But it's a challenge because it comes from a spiritual place where you're saying, focus on what the Lord has for you today. And if all this stuff is keeping you from what he's calling you to do, that's the reason we need to let it go. And Julia, you've done such a beautiful job of challenging us and encouraging us and declutter your heart and your home. And this is releasing right now. So we're going to connect you with what Julia is offering, not only in the book, but also in your blog and your website. So thank you so much, Julia Ubbenga, for being our plus one.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation.